Welcome to the official launch of Teacher Take Care, a guide to well-being and workplace wellness for educators. I'm Kirsten Phillips, the marketing director for Portage Main Press. I'm here to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So first off, I would like to acknowledge that the head offices of Portage Main Press are located on Treaty 1 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation. And I'd also like to point out that this launch is recorded. So if you would like to turn off your cameras, and you can also change your name if you'd like that to not appear as well with the three little dots at the top of your view. Also, please refrain from turning on your camera during the event, and yeah, I think that's that. And then throughout the evening, we welcome you to participate in the chat, which is located at the bottom of your screen. Please remember that we strive to facilitate the safest possible space for our authors and guests. Please show kindness and respect to everyone in attendance. And finally, if you'd like to purchase a copy of Teacher Take Care, you can purchase that online at our website. That will also be shown in the chat along with an exclusive discount for tonight's participants. I'm going to now welcome Jennifer E. Lawson as our host and moderator tonight. I've known Jennifer since the early 2000s. I won't say when. She is the creator and program editor of the hands-on series, which I believe is into a total of over 50 titles now. So I am happy to turn this over to Jennifer, who has a wonderful evening planned for us. Jennifer, you need to turn your mic on.
Sorry about that. I was trying to avoid the dogs barking in the background for as long as I could. So just be patient with Finn and Lizzie because they're kind of taking over the show a bit. Okay, thanks again, Kristen. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this book launch. I know that our writing team is very excited to share our work with you, so we will get started. I would like to introduce to you our elder, Stan Kipling. Stan is a proud Peguis First Nation individual with extensive experience in areas related to the mental health of an Indigenous populations. He was raised on the trap line, hunting, commercial fishing, and living on the land. Stan is a sun dancer and pipe carrier, as well as a traditional harvester of animals and plants, and he has also held sweat lodges. I have been so honored to work with Stan and to have his perspective and guidance on this book. It means the world to our team that he blessed the book itself and is now going to share a blessing to begin our event.
Okay, bonjour, ojo washko anang disankath makwa dudam. So I just want to start, our book launch in a good way. So I want to give thanks to all those who participated. I want to ask the creator to bless this book, bless it as it heals others, those who want to work with it, those who read it and use it. So we want everybody to use it in a good way. And we asked the creator, we asked Mother Earth to watch over us as we work with the youth, the people that, we all work with, and understand the struggles that some of us have, some of the trauma that we've worked through. And so all the contributors, the educators, the teachers, the people who worked on this book, I just want to ask the creator to bless them as they move forward and go forward in their life, and everything works out in a good way. And I want to say miigwech, 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 miigwech. Thank you, Jennifer. Bye. Signing out.
Thank you very much, Stan. I'm now going to introduce to you my dream team. A few of our team members will be taking part in the panel presentation, so I will introduce them later in the session. But for now, let's meet our other writers. Keith McPherson is an author, speaker, yoga instructor, a certified professional coach, and a professional musician. Lisa Dumas-Neufeld is a Métis Mennonite educator currently working on her master's in peace and conflict studies and focuses her work on Indigenous education, trauma, and reconciliation. Megan Hunter is the founder of Peak and Prairie Health Promotion, where she works with organizations to develop psychologically safe and healthy workplaces. Megan accomplished the amazing feat of birthing and nurturing their first child while she was writing this book with us. Cher Brassic is the founder of Connect to Your Calm. Her work focuses on helping people cope with stress and develop healthy habits for their physical and emotional well-being. Joyce Sunata is a former teacher, school administrator, university instructor, and provincial healthy schools leader, but her best role yet is that of new grandma to her grandson, Deacon. Jackie Gagne is a vice principal and former arts coordinator who believes that all children should be immersed in engaging arts-based experiences throughout their education. Monica Chihos-Rosny is an experienced educator now working on her master's in marriage and family therapy and is an advocate of culturally congruent community care. Kelsey McDonald has been a classroom teacher, school counselor, principal, and provincial consultant. She is currently working on her MEd in the counseling psychology program at the University of Manitoba. And finally, last but not least, Sandra Pacheco-Mello has been a principal at a French immersion school, but very recently became the director of curriculum, assessment, and professional learning in the St. James Assiniboia School Division in Winnipeg. And those are just some of the members of our amazing team. You will meet the rest very soon. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this book came to be. And as Kirsten had indicated, and many of you are aware of the hands-on books that I have written over the years, Portage Main Press has been my publisher for over 30 years now, and it's been a great ride with them. But during the pandemic, I have to say that my focus in education shifted a lot. I was teaching at the U of M in the Faculty of Education on Zoom, of course, and my pre-service teachers were so stressed. They were taking courses online for the first time, using Zoom for the first time. They could not have a normal student teaching experience and were worried about getting their credits for that. They weren't able to connect as colleagues, which is such an important part of being in the Faculty of Education finally. And at the same time, I was a school trustee, still am right now. I saw what our educators were going through, daily changes in protocols, pivoting from virtual to in-class teaching, always worrying about their students' learning. The impact on well-being was incomparable to anything I've ever seen in our profession. And so during one of our regular Zoom meetings with my publisher, I suggested the idea of a book on teacher wellness. Actually, I suggested it quite a few times. I told Catherine and her team that I had some amazing colleagues that I just knew would be incredible writers as well. And I thought that such a book would be a labor of love and a gift to educators. There was some hesitation at first because this book is somewhat outside of the scope of my work with Portage and Main, but I can recall the very moment in that meeting when Catherine dropped her pen, jumped in and said, you know what, let's do it. And the rest, as they say, is history. But now came the tough stuff because we needed a foundation and a perspective to develop this book. And for one thing, I knew that we needed a leadership framework. That was going to be an essential thing. And you know, as educators in our professional roles and even in our personal lives, I see us all as servant leaders. We try to work with people, support them, and serve them in a way that empowers them to do and be their very best. The teacher in the classroom works with students, supporting them, serving them so that they have the opportunity to learn and grow. The principal does the same, supporting and serving teachers so they can be empowered to be their best. And so this book is grounded in servant leadership. Every one of our writers, whether they really see it or not, are servant leaders in their support of others. And together, they have created something very special within these pages. Something that speaks to the importance of well-being of educators, something that conveys the need to create schools that foster a safe, positive, and inclusive culture for all, and most especially something to empower each and every one of you to take care of yourselves and others. And so on that note, this is the perfect time to introduce Rochelle North Star Scott, our knowledge keeper on the project. You see, along with a leadership lens, we wanted to infuse Indigenous perspectives and knowledge throughout the book. North Star's contributions have been immeasurable, and I've learned so very much from her. North Star is of Anishinaabe and Métis descent, and her ancestors are from St. Peter's Reserve. She is an Indigenous inclusion coordinator, a Midday woman, pipe carrier, water carrier, and sun dancer. Welcome, Rochelle.
Uju Kiwetanangunaki Koi Dijinakas, my Ngundo Dem, St. Peter's Nadonji. My traditional name is North Star. I am very honored to be here tonight and to have been part of this wonderful project. Coming together as a teacher and as an Indigenous woman, this has been invaluable to me and my well-being, because often as teachers, we don't take good care of ourselves. We take care of others. And so it's so important for us to be infusing Indigenous perspective for our Indigenous teachers as well, because sometimes we see healing taking place in different ways. And so it was important to come from a construct of Indigenous foundations and understanding. So with that in mind, we could call up our first slide. So inside our book, we have this graphic. And so this will be known mostly from people as the medicine wheel. But we actually chose not to use that term because our colleagues are now saying that's a colonial term. And so Stan, our elder on the project, talked to us about calling it the sacred hoop, the sacred circle. I've heard as well. It goes by many names. And so we wanted to honor Indigenous thought again by calling it sacred hoop, sacred circle. So as you can see in that eastern direction is the color yellow. We centered self in the center because that's where we belong in all of those 4 directions. And so those 4 directions help guide us in our healing. And so if we look to that eastern direction in that yellow direction, the east is physical, so our physical bodies, and it's our child. So sometimes due to our trauma, we are still childlike in some ways. If we deal with certain things, we may be going back to what has happened to us as a child. And so we may be coming at dealing with a problem in a childlike way. The important part to note is that yellow signifies new beginnings. So that's why our children and our infants sit in that direction, because we know that when we bring somebody new onto a team, or we have a new family member join our family, that they bring us purpose and meaning, and they bring us that unconditional love as well. So that golden eagle is sitting in that direction as well. And of course, when we bring in our children, we want to be talking about love. So as teachers, when we're working with our students, love coming from spirit is really important when we do that as when we interact with our students. So again, if you're situated in the center, we also need to be taking care of ourselves as we're dealing with our students. So that is very important, because if I don't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to take care of others. So in that southern direction is where the red color sits. And I always, when I teach children this, I always laugh because this is where emotion sits in that southern direction. And I always think about anger, right? And so that red color represents the emotions that we may be holding on to. And of course, what sits in that direction are the teenagers. So the teenagers, of course, go through a range of emotions, sometimes within seconds. And so they're a good representation of that direction as well. In that direction, our wolf sits. That one is often represented in mass media as being angry. So sometimes you'll see the growling face or blood from their kill, right? If they've taken down food. So sometimes they're represented and misunderstood, such as our teenagers. So it sits in that direction as well. So again, being in touch with our emotions as we center ourselves in that center is very important when we're dealing with our students. If we go in our Western direction, you can see that that color is represented in the color black. And that has to do with our mental. So taking care of our mental selves. And of course, as adults, we don't often do that. And I know that probably all of you in the audience lose sleep at night. And so we drive ourselves crazy mentally as we're laying down. We're going, oh, I forgot to tell this student this. Oh, I forgot to do this. Oh, I forgot to actually take care of my family and pick up the cheese that we needed for dinner. And so we're kept up at night in our mental stability. So we get lost and trapped in our darkness, which is in our mind, right? When we close our mind, in our mind's eye, the color is black. So it's represented by that Western direction. And again, the black bear is the representative of that Western direction, because it actually is always, especially at this time of the year, starting to get ready to go into slumber and go into that sleep and hibernate. So again, that mental ability to be able to take care of ourselves, that bear has many months to lay in rest and to take care of oneself and take care of their mind as well. So again, going back to the self, we need to take care of ourselves spiritually. And so that direction is north for us as Indigenous people. The color is represented as white. Of course, north represents where we get our snow, right? So there's that white color. It also represents the elder. And often our elders that hold that great knowledge and that spiritual knowledge, their hair turns white. And so we recognize them as carrying that white direction as well. And so in that direction, you also see that buffalo, but it's not the brown buffalo that you're used to. It's the white buffalo. And so for many of you who are living in Winnipeg, we have a white buffalo calf that was born many years ago. It's not a calf any longer, but is at our zoo. And so there's lots of stories and traditions around when we start to see the white buffalo calf about predictions for the future. And so again, it speaks about the importance of taking care of ourselves and our communities. And so we decided as a team that it would be good to base this thought. And as we worked on this project, also reminding ourselves that we needed to keep our selves in balance. So we needed to keep our physical, our emotional, our mental, and our spiritual selves in balance while we worked for deadlines, while we worked with children, on top of having to write a book. And so taking care of ourselves and balancing out our sacred hoop became of great importance to all of us while we worked on this project. If we could go to the next slide. I just want to quickly say we grounded ourselves in the sacred hoop. And so we revolved all of the chapters in the book in the same way. So we put chapters in each of the 4 directions. I don't see the physical part of that up there, but there we go. Thank you. The physical direction, again, you still see the colors and the meanings for all 4 directions and the animals. But for example, we put physical well-being, which is chapter 5, in that Eastern direction because it represents that physical. In the emotional, we talked about finding joy, right? Finding joy. But so finding that joy, which is that emotion. And so, and that was chapter 7. And so again, in the mental section where our bear is, we have making sense of mindfulness. So being present in our minds and in our bodies. And that was chapter 3. And then in the northern direction, in that spiritual direction, we are talking about giving ourselves permission to be well, restoring the circle. So chapters 2 and 4 talk about spirit. And so those are how we decided we were going to balance all of those chapters out within the book as well. Miigwech.
Thank you, North Star, for sharing with us the importance of balance and harmony for well-being. And we appreciate very much the knowledge that Elder Stan and North Star brought in helping us to find that structure for the book, because it means so very much. And it really speaks to the importance of harmonious development of ourselves. So with that, this is a perfect segue to introduce Shannon Gander. She's our mental health expert on the team. Shannon is the founder and director of Life Work Wellness, a company committed to individual and organizational well-being. Her expertise and knowledge of mental health and wellness has been absolutely invaluable to the development of this book, and she was an incredible right hand for me throughout the process. So Shannon, question for you. When I first approached you to be part of this writing team, I know that you were very busy, you had lots of projects on the go, and you really weren't sure if you could take this on. So maybe you can tell the audience, what was it about this book project that changed your mind? And second part to that, what made this a meaningful project from a mental health perspective, generally and especially now in present time?
Thanks, Jennifer. That's right. When you first approached me, I do believe my first response to you was, oh, no, I don't think I can take on a book project right now. And then when you told me more about it, it was pretty hard to work in the mental health field. And having worked with educators for so many years, to not be intrigued and to not be even more curious. Then, I've gone into schools since the mid-90s, been part of the balance team as well. So Keith McPherson, one of the authors who you mentioned, he was part of the balance team as well. We would travel Manitoba and we go into schools, and you know what it's like when you get people for a finite amount of time. Maybe you get to do a workshop, or you get a half day of, if you're lucky, you get a full day PD. And so there's time for some self-reflection and maybe some group sharing, and maybe even some commitments people are making to each other. But we know that those things are events. And well-being, just like trauma is an experience, not an event, our well-being is a process and it's ongoing. And so the idea that you're always wanting to leave people with more, and the opportunity that this book could leave people with more and being something that people could integrate. And then you had all of these Manitoban authors and educators lined up to tell their story. We know we learn through stories. And so their willingness to share their journeys, to share their learnings, that you had an Indigenous perspective throughout every chapter planned, and for you to then be open to when I said, hey, and how do you feel about 5 more additional authors and former and current educators from Alberta that I think have something to share, and you were just so willing to be inclusive right from the get-go. The other thing that I've really appreciated, and you sold me on, Jennifer, was that there was agreement right across the board by everybody that this would be an invitational guide, that it's not prescriptive, that it invites the reader to be curious, to work at their own pace, that it normalizes that it's hard to work in a caring profession and to prioritize our own well-being. It normalizes that we struggle sometimes and that we have to continually try to get back on that path. So it was very clear that this collective project was going to be a gift. So in the end, Jennifer, I have to say thank you for your persistence. When you ask me about, from a mental health perspective, why is this important, particularly now, and what's made it meaningful? If we look at the pandemic impact on mental health, we know that anxiety, this is not going to be a surprise to anybody listening, anxiety rates have gone up. Whenever we see an increase in anxiety rates, we always see an increase in depression rates. And if people experienced loneliness during the pandemic, those rates were even higher. In terms of trauma-related responses, that has gone up. Post-traumatic stress disorder. We've also seen, in terms of burnout rates, generally 42% of women reporting being burnt out, 35% of men, 49% of women report sleeplessness, 33% of men. If we look at some of the research from the Canadian Teachers Federation, just from 2020 to 2021, 13,000 educators responded, at 97% said that they experience an increased toll load on their physical, mental, and emotional well-being just in that 1 year. And we know that educators in June, they finished the school year with saying they had nothing left, and they kept showing up. It's like they had been holding themselves and everyone around them for over 2 years and worried about coming back in the fall, this much refreshed when they really needed this much and so much more. So people have been looking for stability from all the uncertainty that we've experienced, that, and some of which continues. They've also been looking for permission to take care of themselves. So it's true, Jennifer, at any other time we could have been working on this book, because burnout is not new to the profession of education, nor is it in healthcare. But we even know that it's one of the major contributors to new teachers leaving the profession. But given the toll of the global pandemic and what's been required of educators, and I'll stop and say thank you, anybody who's an educator who's listening or works in a school community. It's been a lot, and it's been particularly meaningful at this time to work on this project and to for this book to be launched at this critical time.
Thanks, Shannon. I loved your message, and I'm really grateful that I was so persistent, because you were amazing on this project. You continue to be amazing as parts of our presentations as well. Your message of self-care, of course, and support is so very important. And our next two speakers will build on that idea as the authors of the chapter, Permission to Be Well. Laura Doney is a certified Canadian counselor who completed her postgraduate thesis in the area of mental health and currently works as a therapist in Calgary. And Dana Fulweiler-Volk is a well-being educator and consultant. Her experience over the past 15 years spans public education as a classroom teacher and systems leader, nonprofit, post-secondary, in addition to her current work in the area of well-being. And I would like to welcome Dana and Laura.
Thanks, Jennifer. We are super honored to be part of this project overall, and also really grateful to everyone who came today to support this release. So our chapter topic was born through many conversations that Laura and I have had about our experiences teaching and as mental health and well-being professionals who support teachers. We're both really passionate about whole school approaches to taking care of ourselves and each other. We can't separate ourselves from the social ecosystem of schools. We're really influenced by our colleagues and our work environments, and responsibility for well-being, we believe, needs to be shared across that system. And that's really reflected in the book as well, because we talk about leadership and organizational well-being. And this includes our own personal agency and practices. They're all interconnected. So for me personally, expanding my view of what well-being and nurturing myself could mean and look like was really empowering. And I learned a lot of that from the field of positive psychology, which is not happyology, but more, intentionally being proactive with our mental health. We could have written for pages and pages, as I know the publisher and editors unfortunately know all too well. So our chapter is really focused and grounded in the things that we as individuals have control and agency to take action on. We do discuss how our well-being can be elevated and made easier by other factors like an incredible staff culture, as I'll share with you in my story. But we bring it back to setting our internal groundwork and building internal conditions and permissions that enable us to pursue well-being in personally meaningful ways, ideally with less guilt and more authentic and realistic action for ourselves. So we were really excited to share things we've learned through practice, through our own personal struggle, and through the science about how the stories we craft about ourselves as teachers and also about well-being can impact our day-to-day experiences of both, and ways to prioritize well-being that are more internally driven and sustainable. So not because we think we should or have to, but because these practices genuinely fuel us and bring us joy, and embracing that joy, even though that can also be vulnerable.
So as you'll see throughout our chapter, we really highlight the importance of stories and narratives. And something that might not be so obvious to the reader, but was very intentional on our part, was to challenge a current dominant discourse in teaching, which we view as this idea that teacher well-being is a means to an end, the end being student well-being. So this comes out in so many ways, but the essence of this narrative is that teachers need to be well because it impacts kids. Like that, put your own mask on first so you can put masks on others type thing. So this is like obviously true and a non-negotiable part of teaching. Teachers intuitively prioritize students' needs over their own on a regular basis. But we really feel that this cannot be the whole story of teacher well-being. So Dana and I intentionally gave voice to another part of the same story, that teacher well-being is an end in and of itself. It's a worthy cause all on its own. So this is really a both and thing. And this book offers a place where we can talk about and elevate both without one diminishing the other. So we really think we don't just put our oxygen mask on so we can help others after. Like, we put it on for ourselves too. So thinking of well-being in this way requires self-permission and self-compassion, which we guide the readers throughout the entire chapter. And ours is one of the introductory chapters, and our intention was for it to be engaging and active and like a slow burn. Actually, I think the entire book is set up like that, with questions for you to sit with and take your time considering, and to really tailor this guide to your own context and your own needs. So we don't really think of it as like a crush 5 chapters over the weekend type book. It was written to be a companion to you throughout your entire career. So Dana is going to share part of her story that we included in the book to give you a taste of how we intermingled ideologies of narratives, self-permission, and the interplay between our personal and relational well-being.
Hard copy, so exciting. When I think about my path to teaching, I go back to the feeling of holding real chalk in my hands when I played pretend. That chalk was the symbol of professionalism I longed for as an 8-year-old. I felt so empowered writing on that little blackboard in my bedroom. By the time I graduated from high school, I had shifted my career sights toward pharmacy. I had somehow learned that pharmacists make good money and are respected, and everyone assumes they're smart. At the time, those things mattered to me. I volunteered in a pharmacy and noticed myself watching the clock, waiting to leave. I thought about that little girl with the chalk in her hand and reflected on the different ways I viewed pharmacy versus teaching. Pharmacy was clear, teaching seemed muddled. As a young person, I had heard contradictory views about the teaching profession and absorbed conflicting narratives. Teaching is an honorable calling. Teaching is for people who just want summers off. Teaching is a beautiful way to inspire the next generation. Teaching is for people who can't do other things. Teachers are generous and intelligent. Teachers aren't actual professionals. Teachers aren't paid nearly enough. Teachers are paid too much, and on and on. At that time, I valued others' approval more than my own. My 18-year-old brain couldn't make sense of other people's opinions of teaching. When Laura and I first started brainstorming our chapter, she really challenged me with powerful questions when I told her why I became a teacher. She asked me questions that expanded the lens I was looking through, asking me about what it was specifically that made me want to pursue pharmacy at the time instead of teaching, because that wasn't part of the initial story that I told her. So she pushed me to see the parts of the story that I don't usually tell, which was and is hard and vulnerable to admit and to say out loud and to write out for strangers to read. But it's true for me. And maybe others, it encourages them to think about their own story. I also realized in this reflection how the opinions I both heard and perceived to exist from others about teaching impacted my own approach to my well-being as a teacher. I reflected on what it was, especially in my early years, that kept me energized and fueled. Because I had an awesome time, even though it was challenging. I had a great time in my first years, despite both personal and professional challenges. And it was the people, my colleagues, the laughs and the tears and having each other's backs We really take care of ourselves and we take care of each other in this profession. So I want to read a little bit about that as well. I had the gift of starting my career in a school culture of collegiality and support. I experienced the giving and receiving of energy that happens when we feel seen, heard, and valued. Staff were encouraged to take initiative, collaborate, be authentic, and connect outside of work. Thanks to the amazing power of connection, I experienced trust, joy, and the feeling of being part of a team. Not only did my colleagues support me as a new professional, but they also supported me personally. During my first year of teaching, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Looking back, I see how the stress and uncertainties of a new career, living in a new city, and a parent's illness affected my relationships and well-being. I struggled to find balance. I realize now how instrumental my colleagues were to my well-being and growth. They just got it. The bonds built between us lasted throughout the years. Many of those colleagues became lifelong friends. My dad passed away several years after I had moved on from that school, and the group card I received from them was filled with love, compassion, and meaningful stories my colleagues remembered about my dad. It was written as if I were still a part of the community. I derived sustenance and strength from this community. I grew as an educator and as a young woman through both my comfortable and uncomfortable experiences at that school. I really hope that all the teachers on this call can think of, a place like that where you had the privilege of teaching and connecting with colleagues. And each of us is responsible for the energy we contribute to an environment. There's no perfect, but that school was a psychologically safe space for me, which I have the language for now. Yet even with that supportive culture, I still really struggled to give myself permission to prioritize my well-being. There seemed to always be an undercurrent of guilt, no matter what I did or didn't do, especially when it came to prioritizing my own well-being. And for many of us, guilt can become a barrier to the pursuit of our own well-being. An entire book could probably be written just on navigating guilt in teaching or in any helping profession. Laura and I then explore how self-permission can help redirect our attention toward a new story. So one about possibilities and hope for being well as a teacher that's unique to each of us. Self-permission is a concept that peers of mine have written about in our Master of Applied Positive Psychology program at the University of Pennsylvania. So I want to give a shout out to Cecilia Lovestam and Nico Rose.
So in the chapter, we include a bunch of self-permission prompts. And I want to read a few of them out to you now and just give you like a little sneak peek and invite you to think about how these statements show up in your life. Which ones are sticky for you? Which ones come with ease? And which ones have you never even considered? I deserve to flourish. I give myself permission to follow my aspirations. I allow myself to engage in activities where I feel fully immersed in what I'm doing. I permit myself to nourish my relationships and spend time with people I care about. I don't feel guilty for taking care of my personal well-being. So lastly, we just want to offer a little taster for how we then go about helping readers craft their own manifesto and story of well-being at the end of the chapter. So Dana is just going to pop these into the chat, and there's more than this at the end of our chapter, but these were kind of our prompts to help you look towards the future, feel hopeful about what well-being means for you. And on behalf of both of us, we just want to say that being part of this creative process has been an honor and a joy. And I got like a new best friend out of writing this chapter with Dana, which has been awesome. And so thank you everyone who's here tonight to celebrate this collective work. We're really proud.
Thank you so much, Laura and Dana. To our audience, please make sure that you check out the chat for the questions and prompts in there. They really will give you something to reflect on after this session is done. Thank you, Laura and Dana, for sharing your stories and encouraging us to reflect on our own stories and our own well-being. It's such important work that you do, and what you have contributed to this book is simply good medicine for all of us. At this point, we are going to open it up to some degree to our panel presenters, our other writers, and to our audience for questions. So I'm going to be getting some of those questions as we get started, but in the meantime, I already have a few that I'm going to ask to some of our writers. So I'm going to start with Keith McPherson. I don't know if Ryan can get Keith up on the screen for me. There we go. Good stuff. Thank you. So Keith, here's a question I'm sure every teacher's going to ask when your chapter is all about mindfulness. How do I find the time to practice mindfulness if I don't even have time to eat my lunch during the day?
That's a great question. Well, the context of mindfulness that I come into this chapter with is mindfulness is about paying attention in the present moment with kindness to yourself, other people, and the world around you. It's one of the best ways I heard mindfulness defined. And, you know, there's this misconception that mindfulness is all about sitting on a meditation cushion doing nothing. And it's like, when would I have time to do that as an educator? And what I've come to find is that mindfulness can actually be integrated into what we're already doing. It's a practice of how am I being while I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing. Even right now, as you're sitting here at the Zoom conversation, just kind of notice, like, where are you right now? How are you being in this present moment? So a couple of practices or ways that I've integrated this into my day. Brushing my teeth is a big one. I don't know about anybody else on this call, but when I'm brushing my teeth, I have this tendency to want to wander around the house and change the laundry and meal prep. It's kind of gross. But to actually like slow down and to just brush your teeth for a couple minutes, or a conversation that you're having during the day. You know, so often we race out of the present moment to other things. The invitation to just keep coming back to what's here right now in front of you, and like to listen and to have that conversation in the present moment is an anchoring practice. Also on your eating, which is a big one, especially if you're in the middle of a school day and you're, you know, supervising intramural sports or whatnot during the lunch hour. But even to just take like a couple moments to just, while you're eating, you've got to eat, is just to like experience slowing down the chewing of your food, to smell it, to appreciate it. Just finding little moments throughout the day that bring you back to how am I being while I'm doing everything on my to-do list. So that's how I'd probably answer that one, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Keith. I'm going to take that whole idea of time and extend it a little bit farther with Cher, because we have a question here that says, in your chapter, Cher, you mentioned finding 20 minutes in your day to do deep breathing. So what does that look like for you? And where do you find those 20 minutes? What difference does it actually make?
That's a great question. And, you know, to be honest, when I first started, you know, exploring breathing, you know, how it could help me physically, emotionally, spiritually, I made it way more complicated than it needed to be, because I felt like, kind of like Keith was talking about, this idea of, you know, meditation and sitting and having 20 minutes of quiet time. I was like, that is not my reality. And so there was a period of time where I just completely gave up and was like, who actually does this? So I had to kind of look at it from a different perspective, because of kind of my health journey. It really was key to how I physically felt throughout the day. So now there's a couple of anchoring points in my day. So, you know, for example, first thing in the morning, I used to be the kind of person who, as soon as the alarm would get off, I'd either grab my phone, check my emails, or jump out of bed and start frantically getting ready for my day. My first 5 minutes of my day actually are in bed. When that alarm goes off, I turn it off and I just lay for about 5 minutes and I breathe. And so when I start my day, it's, as opposed to being from a place of like franticness, I feel much more calm and much more grounded. And I've started to also incorporate setting some intentions for that day, so that I'm being very mindful and intentional for kind of how I want to start my day. no surprise, that's how I end my day as well. You know, popping into bed as opposed to lying there with my mind racing with a million things going through my brain. By just kind of tapping into that breathing for at least 5 minutes when I first pop into bed is another moment that, and I do it every day. So it's time that's there. It's just how I choose to use it differently now. And then for me, another 5-minute kind of window is at the end of my day. So whether it's been a day of, you know, answering emails, you know, talking with schools or conference organizers, or being in schools and working with teachers in the PD days, you know, you kind of come back from a full day. As I transition between the end of that day and the beginning of kind of, you know, life after work, I choose to, once again, just take 5 minutes, whether it's in the car, whether it's at the dinner table, whether it's just flopping on the couch and doing it. And that really kind of helps me shift how I'm physically feeling for the remainder of my day. As for the other 5 minutes, I just kind of take them whenever I need it. It could be at a stop sign as I'm driving to a school. It can literally be when I'm in the washroom and I need to take a moment, or just looking for those little windows, because we all have those pockets of time where we can do things. What I found, though, can really help is when you choose to be intentional. As opposed to picking up my phone, I then do something different with that time, tap into my breath, and can really physically feel much differently. In terms of the impact that it has, you know, I believe, and I learned this from, you know, kind of the medical professionals that I worked with, is that over time, by constantly giving my body the kind of turning off that that sympathetic part of our system, where I'm just going all the time, but kind of regularly activating that parasympathetic, that calming part of our nervous system throughout the day, it really made an impact not only to how I felt mentally, spiritually, but also physically.
Wow, thank you so much, Cher. I think we can all learn something from that one, right? As you were speaking, I was thinking about what Keith had said, and mindfulness and slowing down my mind that tends to be going, you know, a million miles an hour, and then taking the time to be intentional, and to breathe and to find ourselves kind of in the present moment and grounded is so very important. Thanks so much, Cher. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here, and I want to ask Kelsey about her chapter. Kelsey's chapter, and I love the title, Thank You for Being a Friend. In your chapter, Kelsey, you include many ways that teachers can offer support to colleagues. And it's interesting, in Dana's story, she talked about how important that culture was, right? That culture of safety and security and support. So which of the tips that you gave in your chapter do you feel is the best place to start as a colleague in any building?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that it's the tip about normalizing not okay days, and I'll pop a link in the chat once I've got my mute button back on. We live in a really confusing time. We're hearing all of this stuff about how impacted people's mental health is, and yet in our workplaces, the research reflects that 95% of employees use an excuse other than the truth that they need a mental health day when they take time away from work to care for themselves. And I know for myself, I most certainly used to have that same practice. Now I will say, when someone asks, oh, were you sick yesterday? I will say, I was just not myself and I needed some time. I've recently, I'm reading a book right now that uses the metaphor of emotional weather. And so here in Winnipeg, we've got really extreme weather. And if it's bitterly cold in my emotional world, or it is plus 40 plus the humidex, maybe I'm not well enough to be in the workplace. And even people who have California emotional weather, where it's consistent and sunny almost all of the time, they have rainy days too. And so if we're honest with our colleagues, instead of living our curated Instagram lives where everything is perfect, when we're at work, when someone asks, oh, how are you today? And you're fine. The Canadian Mental Health Association has a really beautiful video, that's the link I'll pop, about just saying, you know, I'm not myself today. We all have not okay days. There's nothing wrong with that. It's part of the human condition.
Wow. You know, I've always joked that teachers are the greatest of thieves, because when you see a good idea or a good bulletin board or a good book, we always take it, right? So I am definitely going to take that emotional weather. I love that analogy, and it works so well for what we're talking about in this book. Joyce, I want to ask a question of you, because it was interesting. You had just finished reading the entire book. So we're going to get a bit of an opportunity to kind of get your sense of what it looked like to read the whole book and what you have learned and what you would tell our guests here, as those that haven't read the whole book.
Wow. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to each and every author. Oh my goodness. I want, and I still will, but I wanted to just message everybody after I read your chapter. I was kind of on a timeline because I wanted to finish it by today, but thank you. Thank you. To be, to have my chapter published is an honor. And to think of writing a whole book is just like crazy and overwhelming in thinking about that. But in reading the whole book, it's like, what a team. There are pieces of stories that are so relatable to me, to teachers that are in the classroom now. I just know people will relate to them. And I love my co-authors that you were able, and how you reached out and put the research in. I was sharing with Jennifer, sometimes going through my journey, and in chapter 7, you'll learn about some of the strategies that I used to regain my wellness and start to heal. I did not read anything to go, oh, it's great to sit outside. It's good for your emotional well-being. I was drawn outside. I sat by a creek. I laid on Mother Earth. I had never referred to the earth as Mother Earth prior to that time. And so I'm feeling a bit emotional. Just the importance that, and the ability to trust our knowing, and to know that there's people surrounded around us that if we need to, or we want to communicate the research, that it's there. Like, so each of you, I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to write there. So in that way, it's a very powerful book. It's not a to-do, a have-to prescriptive. It's like, look at these beautiful educators that have had these experiences, and here's how they can contribute to you. And Rochelle and Elder Stan, like, what a beautiful way is to put it together within the Sacred Hoop. So many, many thank yous to you, Jennifer, for being that spark that brought us together. Shannon for dragging in the Calgary team, and everybody, thank you so much. So I really believe that our educators and non-educators will read it and benefit and really enjoy the whole compilation. So thank you.
That was a great little segue for me to be able to say that I have got family on this link from East Coast to West Coast, and none of them are educators. I have my niece and my sister-in-law in Halifax, Andrea Lawson and Stephanie Lawson, and my sister-in-law in Vancouver, Michelle Walcraft, and my son downstairs in the basement. So there we are across the country. None of them are educators, and I know they will all get something out of these presentations and certainly out of the book. So that's just a little personal thing. It just worked in perfectly with what Joyce was talking about. It's interesting what Joyce was saying, though, about how we have to trust ourselves sometimes, because many of us know that we feel good in nature, right? And of course, now there's lots of research on forest bathing, but really forest bathing is what we've always done. We just go into nature, right? And we lie in the moss or whatever. So that trusting our instincts, I think, is really, really critical. I'm going to do another switch. I'm waiting for my publicists to tell us when we're done, but we're not done, and we're going to just keep going if we can. Lisa, are you still online with us? I know you have to leave early, so I want to make sure that I get to you. Lisa Dumas Neufeld wrote such a powerful chapter on her own journey as well. And I'd like you to share with us, Lisa, how the ideas of identity and wellness connect for you as you wrote your chapter, because I know that it was quite a journey for you. And I was
Mhm, yeah.
privileged to share that journey, but go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I've learned that identity and wellness are inextricably linked. I don't think they can be separated. I think that identity sits at the center of the sacred circle. And if we don't know who we are, I don't know how we can be well in a whole way. And so writing this chapter really helped me kind of gather the pieces of my story, my family's story, dust them off, polish them up, put them together, the mess, the imperfection, the beauty, all of it. And hopefully it can help somebody else who's struggling with their identity. Because yeah, I think if we don't know who we are, I'm coming to understand I don't think we can be fully well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, I think each and every one of us struggle with our identity. I think we're always asking, well, who am I and what am I going to be when I grow up? Right? And we're still saying it. So I think that's all part of our identity. And you're so right. Actually, I was visualizing the sacred hoop again, and I saw North Star also nodding, because that self in the center also could be identity, right? And then how does our identity, how is it reflected in our physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional well-being? So thank you for sharing that, Lisa. On to a bit of a different spin. I'd like to talk to Megan about her chapter. We're really having an interesting, you'll see by talking to the different authors how varied our topics were. And that's what I love so much about what we brought together here. So Megan, I want to ask you, what inspired the approach to physical well-being that you wrote about in your chapter? Because it's not what I think people would expect. And how is it different from typical advice we are given about caring for our bodies? Everybody listen up really carefully.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I felt like I was writing the chapter that was the elephant in the room, as in it's the obvious part of wellness that people think about. They go right to, what am I eating? Am I exercising enough? What does my body look like? And I've worked in the area of physical health promotion for some time, and I was just so sad at the comparison that we place on our bodies to other people, and how hard we are on these beautiful sculptures that we get to walk around in and how they function. And we spend so much time comparing it or shaming it or wanting it to change that we spend little time enjoying it. When I was writing this chapter, I wanted to flip the paradigm. I wanted to focus on checking in with self to see that we have enough fuel, enough energy, enough rest, enough hydration before we go out to do the things that we want to accomplish physically, whether it be climb a mountain or teach a full day of school with very few washroom breaks. And we even talk about washroom breaks and why they're important. I felt, why don't we look at our bodies as the beautiful place they are to live, and how we can care more from a compassionate place and less from a comparative place. There's even a flow chart that you can take a look at for what sort of activity does your body crave today, and how do you know what to choose?
Thank you, Megan. Again, you can see how it goes back in many ways. I go right back to Dana and Laura's work, because that taking care of our bodies, we have to focus it as knowing it's part of our self-care, but also it's also part of being of self-compassion, right? That we can be compassionate and give ourselves permission to care for ourselves and take the time to care for ourselves, because we know how busy educators always are. So thank you very much for that, Megan. If I can go on to Jackie Gagne. Jackie wrote an incredible chapter on the arts and wellness through the arts.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there. You got your camera on there, Jackie?
I do.
I see your name now.
Yeah, you see my name? My camera is on.
Okay, well, how about if we listen to you then? I have a question for you.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, if you figure it out, that's fine, but we'll listen in the meantime. What do you hope readers gain by reading your chapter on arts-based wellness?
Okay. My chapter is focused on arts as a strategy for wellness. And it's my hope that readers will begin the process of seeing themselves through a different lens, through that of an artist. We're all creative in different ways. Some of us maintain a beautifully landscaped yard. Others have an eye for design. The power of the arts and accessing our creativity releases feel-good chemicals that produce positive psychological effects. Just think about that feeling in your body when you sing your favorite song out loud, or you sing amongst a group of people. It's just such a great feeling. I really hope that readers connect with my chapter in a personal way that inspires them to push their creativity even further in ways that nourish their souls through arts experiences. Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to this wonderful book. I'm sorry that my video will not work. I'm pressing these buttons and it just will not.
That's okay,
But
Jackie.
thanks everyone. It's wonderful, wonderful for the soul.
Thank you for the message. It was loud and clear, whether we had the camera on or not. It's so interesting and important what you had said about we are all artists in different ways, or can be in different ways. I can't draw at all, but maybe somebody thinks I could draw or I could sketch, but music is where I find my wellness with the arts. So, and somebody else, it might be sketching. I know my niece, she sketches all the time. So we come to it with different elements of the arts that help us in that way. So thank you very much, Jackie. I'm going to ask Monica now if we can ask a question of her. She wrote an amazing chapter with North Star on the importance of collaborating and how wellness can be immersed into the classroom and through the collaboration with others. So Monica, your career has taken a few different turns, and I'd like to ask you, what impact did this project have on you in the context of leaving teaching to become a therapist?
So my first thought when I was asked to be part of this project was yes. I was on parental leave, but had officially resigned at that point last year when I asked to be part of the project. And I really had this urge to do something for teachers. And I saw my colleagues struggling during the pandemic with their wellness. And so I thought this would be kind of like a gift that I could leave people with when I was leaving teaching. But surprisingly, it brought up a lot of emotions for me. It really brought up a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of thinking of who am I to tell people how to be well. I struggled with my own wellness as a teacher so much. And even just reading Joyce's chapter and looking at all the, those flags of burnout. Yeah, I was checking those boxes just a few years into my career. So I had to work through a lot of emotions with that. And I think what really helped me actually was working with North Star. It brought a lot of joy to me working with her and writing that chapter together and interviewing Mushgan. It really brought home that lesson that we all struggle with our wellness at various points and in different ways. And I don't need to be an expert in order to share what I have learned over time. And my hope was that this chapter could be a contribution to this resource that I wish I had when I started teaching, and that maybe that would have helped me be more well as a teacher. And I'm hoping that could be part of a bigger cultural shift in education, where we do prioritize teacher wellness and wellness of school staff in general, because we all matter too. and yeah, not only a means to an end for students, but for, school staff to be well is important. Thank you, and miigwech.
Thank you so much, Monica. I loved what you were saying about that imposter syndrome, right? How can I be telling others to be well? But don't you believe that the fact that all of us have struggled make us better at this kind of work?
Oh, absolutely.
I profess that the best teachers are the ones that struggled in some area, because they get it when kids struggle, right? So, and I think the same is true of well-being. We all struggle, and therefore we can empathize with others and support them in that way.
Before we switch to someone, can I say thank you and miigwech to all of you, the team, and also that I'm so grateful to be here today, because if my baby's due end of the month, so if I miss the in-person launch, I'm so grateful I could see you all virtually.
That's great. I love all these babies being birthed during our process. Good luck, Monica. Thank you so much. One more question, which is terrific. I know some of you might have to leave, but Sandra, if I could ask you a question. Sandra is a pillar of leadership when it comes to creating a school with a positive culture, where wellness is really, really focused upon and intentionally looked at. So, Sandra, if you can tell us, what kind of feedback did you get from your staff when you made an explicit focus on their mental health and their mental well-being?
Thank you. Before I answer that, I want to acknowledge that I'm grateful to all of you for taking minutes out of your busy lives, that all of us right now are maybe carrying something or some things that are stirring in here that we have to tuck away for this hour and a half. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that explicitly. So I made it an intentional and explicit decision to focus on teacher well-being during my time at one of the elementary schools that I worked at. And the feedback ranged from, we went from curious to almost a little bit of distrust, like what is going to happen here? What is this woman talking about? And why is she asking me to do these crazy things? To appreciation and ease. And so when we started, because the chapter is anchored in servant leadership, and that goes back to the beginning of the book and back to some of the things that it just echoes everything that everyone has said. It created space for staff to be able to feel safe and vulnerable, and to destigmatize those days where we don't feel well, and to just draw attention to them. Not only destigmatize, but draw attention to the fact that we have days that are not okay, and that we are together as we work through them, or not, because it's not up to me to be the therapist, it's up to me to be the school leader, but it's a starting point. And so it allowed that space, and it allowed us to live in the relational. And because we could live in relational trust and vulnerability, it provided just anchors for our staff to be able to anticipate that every month we were going to do a wellness activity, whether it was something fun or something a little more serious. But we moved from that intentionality to almost progress throughout the year. And it became a non-negotiable that that's what we were going to do. So I don't know if that's okay or not for teachers, but the feedback was that it was positive. And you could hear staff talking about some of the activities that we did, or laughing about making connections with our eyes and holding it for a minute and practicing some mindfulness. So it was really a great experience. I hope to continue that kind of work in my new role. I also want to say that the book is about self-reflection too as leaders, or my chapter anyway. As leaders, boy, oh boy, do we forget this. And you're right, imposter syndrome at its best. Like, who the heck am I to talk about this? But, you know, Jennifer, our walks in the forest, I want to thank you for that, because that's when you as a leader knew I was most overwhelmed, and you knew that we needed to make space for some well-being. So thank you. Merci to everybody. Miigwech. I'm appreciative. I hope this takes us to just moving forward and really building space for dialogue and doing away with the stigma that is teachers being unwell. And you know, thank you for letting me be part of this journey. I can't even express how grateful I am.
Isn't that a wonderful way to kind of wrap up our book launch? Thank you so much, Sandra. We are past time, and I know many of you have stayed on, and I know that as educators, you're leading busy lives and likely have more to do tonight, marking or planning. Hopefully you've included some self-care in there. But I would like to conclude this virtual book launch with thanks to so many people. First, to my publisher, Catherine Gerbasi, and her team at Portage Main Press, Kirsten, for her help tonight. You made this book a reality, and I am eternally grateful for that. To our publicist, Nicole, and our tech expert, Ryan from ZG Stories, thank you for facilitating this event. It seemed to go perfectly. To my writing team, well, it takes a village, right? I can't begin to say how much I appreciate each and every one of you for your contributions to the book and for your friendship, which means so very much to me. And finally, to all of those that have joined us today, I know that many of you are educators, and this book is dedicated especially to you. May you always take care. Thank you very much, everyone.